Have you ever wondered if a small, simple action could change the course of an entire life? And if hearing about such a transformation might help each of us find greater wisdom and kindness? This ancient story, drawn from a past life of the Buddha, can guide us to see how even the tiniest spark of resourcefulness and virtue can grow into a bright flame of understanding. Long ago, in a kingdom known for its busy markets and lush gardens, a wise treasurer served a good and just king. This treasurer, remembered by the people as Treasurer Little, lived modestly and saw meaning where others saw none. He understood that wealth came not only from gold, but also from noticing hidden opportunities and using them kindly. He believed that through patience, gentle effort, and moral choices, even the smallest objects or events could bring about surprising blessings. He often observed the world with calm eyes, seeing how the patterns of nature, trade, and human effort could weave together into unexpected fortunes. In those days, merchants shouted their prices in crowded streets, workers hurried to fill their baskets, and the wealthy passed by without a glance at those less fortunate. But Treasurer Little did not measure people by their status. He quietly watched how lives rose and fell on subtle turns of fate, and how a moment of insight could open doors where walls seemed unbreakable. He often thought that a humble seed planted in the right soil could grow into a bountiful tree. One morning, as Treasurer Little made his way along a dusty path toward the king's hall, he paused. Lying on the ground was a small, lifeless mouse. Most would have ignored it, seeing nothing but dirt and decay. Yet the treasurer knew that even something as worthless as a dead mouse could become the start of a journey if handled wisely. He reflected that if a clever, determined person picked it up and used it well, this tiny creature might become the first step toward a stable life and a full home. Though he spoke no loud words, the treasurer's quiet thought carried weight. Nearby, a young man lingered, a man from a good family but had fallen on hard times. He wore simple, worn clothes and carried a heavy heart. Life had not been kind to him, and each day seemed like a test he could not pass. Yet he was attentive, and when he saw the treasurer's thoughtful pause at the sight of the mouse, he sensed a hidden meaning. He realized that perhaps this wise official saw something no one else did. Perhaps this small, worthless thing could lead to something better. Inspired, the young man picked up the dead mouse and resolved to follow the thread of opportunity wherever it might lead. On that same day, he sold the mouse for a tiny coin at a tavern that needed it to feed a cat. With that single coin, he bought sweet molasses and drew fresh water into a clean pot. He carried these out along a path where flower gatherers returned, weary from hours in the forest. He offered each a taste of molasses and a cool sip of water, asking nothing more than that if they ever had spare blossoms, they might remember his kindness. The flower gatherers were touched by his gentle spirit. Soon, they offered him flowers left over at the end of their work. He sold these blooms in the city for a small profit, and slowly his savings grew. As the young man's handful of coins increased, so did his understanding. Each morning, he repeated his small acts of care. He brought a bit of sweetness and water to the workers, and in return, they offered him blossoms. He sold these at the market with quiet honesty. Thus, what had begun with a dead mouse now formed a steady rhythm of goodwill and gain. He saw that a simple, honest exchange built trust, and trust gave him steady footing on which to stand. Before long, a sudden storm shook the king's garden. Fierce winds scattered branches and leaves across the royal grounds, leaving the gardener in despair. Tidying up seemed a monstrous task. Hearing of this, the young man asked if he could have the fallen wood and leaves in return for clearing the mess. The gardener, relieved to have any help, agreed at once. The young man then enlisted the neighborhood children. He gave them a taste of molasses and a few kind words, and in no time, they happily gathered every twig and leaf into a neat pile. Soon, a palace potter, searching for fuel to fire his clay bowls, found this perfect pile of wood. Without negotiating, he paid a fair price, leaving the young man with coins, plus a few extra bowls that the potter included as goodwill. As his small fortune increased, so did his friendships. He learned the art of listening quietly to traders and workers who passed through the city. A land trader mentioned that a horse dealer would soon arrive with 500 horses. Hearing this, he approached the grass cutters who worked outside the city. Some of them had tasted his sweet molasses and remembered his kindness. He asked them to give him their first bundles of grass before selling their own. They agreed without hesitation. When the horse dealer arrived, he found no grass available except for what the young man had secured. The dealer willingly paid a high price. Once again, trust and forethought multiplied the young man's wealth. In time, a sea trader, who had grown friendly with the young man, mentioned that a large ship had just reached the port. Its cargo, mysterious and precious, would soon attract many buyers. The young man hired a fine carriage, rode to the harbor, and approached the ship's captain. He offered a partial payment, leaving his signet ring as a promise that he would purchase the entire cargo. Then he set up a pavilion near the dock, instructing that any arriving merchants be respectfully announced by attendants before they reached him. When they came, eager to buy the ship's goods, they learned the cargo was already claimed. To get a share, they had to deal with the young man. Impressed by his calm confidence, each merchant paid handsomely, first to secure a portion of the cargo, then to buy out his entire claim. By the end of these dealings, the young man returned to the city with a wealth so great it hardly seemed real. Yet this prosperity had not arrived through cruelty or deceit. Every step had been honest and fair. Now holding a fortune, the young man did not forget who had sparked his rise. He returned to treasure a little, sharing the story of how he began with nothing and ended with treasures beyond measure. He described how the treasurer's silent thought about the mouse had led him to see possibilities where others saw none. Treasurer Little recognized that the young man's new status was not a matter of luck alone. It came from patience, goodwill, foresight, and moral effort. To show faith in the young man's character, Treasurer Little welcomed him into his family by arranging a marriage to his own sister. The cycle was complete. A useless mouse, turned by gentle wisdom into a spark of opportunity, had led a struggling soul toward a life of dignity, generosity, and respect. Much later, in a time when the Buddha lived and taught, he recalled this ancient story. He revealed that in that distant age, he himself had been Treasurer Little. He did not share this memory to boast about wealth, nor to celebrate clever trading. Instead, he told it so listeners would realize that small acts of understanding and kindness can produce great results. Something worthless can become a source of prosperity, and that prosperity, if guided by moral principles, can uplift everyone involved. Many who heard this tale learned to pause and consider the world differently. They came to believe that what seems trivial might hide great potential. They understood that a person who invests honest effort, patience, and kindness into even the smallest opportunity can turn a faint spark into a warm and steady flame. One common reflection quietly passed among wise listeners was that the tiniest seed of compassion can grow into a vast tree of blessings. Another often repeated thought suggested that a single spark, if gently fanned, can light the path ahead.